reach out to one of us and find out how to join. We will also reimburse anyone that joins after this program. So we'll reimburse you for the cost of this program should you join in the next few days. We are super excited to have Pamela join us for the two programs today. I've had the pleasure of hearing her speak at conferences and programs just throughout the country in my time with Salvation Army before I was with Methodist. Over her career, she's made countless presentations throughout the country to development professionals, plan giving councils, estate and tax attorneys, accountants, and financial planners, and to prospects and donors about gift planning and charitable giving techniques. Pamela is known for a motivational and empowering message stated in practical and pragmatic terms about gift planning, advantages and options that can benefit individuals, families, and valued charities, and the essential ingredient of how to do what you want to do. After graduating the top 10% of her law class, Pamela was examiner in the estate and gift tax division of the Internal Revenue Service, and later practiced business, corporate, and probate law with an Indianapolis law firm before joining the nonprofit sector. She began her nonprofit career at the Indiana University Foundation, spending 11 years there. She helped increase their plan giving expectancies fourfold in only a few years. Since then, she started her own firm specializing in gift planning, plan giving program design, and implementation and training. Her passion is helping people discover what is most important to them, and she cherishes the relationships that spring from getting to know individuals and couples. She finds great joy in offering them the gift of empowerment and the legacy. Everyone join me in welcoming Pamela. We'll go ahead and jump into the program.
Just lovely, Joey. I just love it. Thank you so, so much. And thanks for having me with you. I am so sorry about your COVID woes. I hope they get better. We're all on that rocky road, that tough path together. So here's sending you good vibes from Southern Indiana. I sit on the edge of a beautiful wooded ravine. It is just lovely here in the fall. The colors have yet to change, but it's idyllic in so many ways. Thank you too, Sarah. We're here today. I'm so glad you're with us because Joey is quite right. It is all about practical and pragmatic plan giving. And you have to believe and know that clients, that donors are better off many, many times with a well-planned gift plan than without one. That is hard to believe, but it's true because most of us think, gee whiz, here it is, almost October. It's coming up to the time I'm going to be flooded with solicitations from my favorite nonprofits. And there goes check after check after check at the house, minus, minus, minus. So most of us are trained to think charitable giving is a minus effect. And it really, really is not. Because in charitable gift planning, which is what we're talking about today, the universal language is assets and also donor or client concerns. What are their concerns as they're aging, taking care of family, addressing their portfolio mix, all those things. We are problem solvers in many, many ways, because I like to say, many times when I go out to speak, I invite the audience, if you went out and talked to the next 10 people walking in this building and said, have you ever heard of a planned gift that pays income to anyone? Most people would say no, let alone other things than a tax break. That's it. It's a tax break driven idea and nothing else. So we can actually talk about the concept of, dare I say it, dare I mention it, diversification. My father was a banker. My husband was a banker. They were both bank examiners too, but they were bankers. So we think of investment, we think of portfolio, we think of diversification, we think of investment mix, and many of your donors do too. Plus it serves them well. To have some charitable gift annuities in an overall portfolio is a good thing. To have less management of assets in a portfolio as we age is a good thing, as long as they're converted to a way we can use it to live out our long days. So that's what we're really going to talk about. This session is really going to address what you often hear donors, clients, prospects say, and then what you can respond to move a gift conversation along. Because I will tell you, in Memphis and Tennessee and Indiana, where I live, philanthropy is near and dear to people's hearts. I mean, it's very much how many people define themselves, is in their volunteerism, their activism, their giving. And really what we want to do is encourage philanthropy. It need not be directed to the charity that your buddy it works for. It can be any charity. We are wide open and global in helping the donor follow their heart or passion. That really is our business. And it matters a lot in terms of people's life satisfaction goals. When you hear the term bucket list, which I take umbrage at, I'm sure it's because I'm aging. I just take umbrage at it. But I would absolutely think making a difference in your community and your family and your life in some way matters a lot. And we are problem solvers many times to say, here's the keys to the kingdom. I remember once having a prospect, a donor come in to see me, and it was, I don't even remember what the scenario was, but it was one that I often say, piece of cake. And I think I said that with her. And so I went through the whole thing. She burst into tears. She said, I knew there was a way to do it, and you were the first person to tell me how. So I think about that story mightily because, as I said in the last session, in the marketplace of ideas, there's always commerce, and there always should be. And the more you learn, the more you realize you do not know. We are forever seekers in this world, and plan giving is part of that. Now, technologically, I am a Luddite. I have a paper calendar sitting right here, and I'm proud of it. I have paper books. I'm good with all of that. But it's to say Sarah's going to advance the slides for us today. So let's go to number one. All right, what we're going to start with is to set the tone for the cues and clues we're going to get to right here in just a little bit. And this is about donor benefits and charitable giving. My goodness, why would anyone think charitable gift planning is a plus? My late father was a banker, investor. He was quite a man in so many ways. Later in life, he got dementia, all those things that happened. But he asked me 3 or 4 times, what is it you do? And he could just never get his hands around it. And the last time he says, well, I don't understand what you do or why anyone would find it valuable. Thank you, Dad. So it's very mystified to many people, but we really help people invest in their values. It's a values-driven business, don't you think? I'm looking at Leslie's pretty picture right here. St. Jude's, that's the values business. There's lots of values currency in what we do and how people want to be thought of and remembered, and all for it. We want to be agents of change to let that happen. So number one, what's the first donor benefits? Oh, that joy, that personal satisfaction. Do you know they've actually said, they've done some studies and said giving to a charity gives you the endorphin rush that those joggers get when they run? Did you know that there's a physical response or something about it, and that it's something they want to repeat? IU has a huge dance marathon that they've had for decades, and it raises money. Oh, you'll like this, Leslie. It's for Riley Children's Hospital up in Indianapolis, named after the poet James Whitcomb Riley, who wrote Little Orphan Annie, if you want to know. And when he died, his friend said, he was childless, never married, was a boarder in somebody's house for 25 years before he died. But they named a children's hospital after him because he wrote that poem and others. There's not a family in Indiana that's unaffected by Riley. It is the best lesson in philanthropy any state could ever have. The little county school my kids went to after years at Montessori, if they wanted to wear a cap on the last Friday of the month, they had to put a cord in the box for Riley. This dance marathon is raised, and now the local high school gets in on it. So that's tally, I think last tally, $41 million for Riley. And that just teaches philanthropy like you cannot believe. Our Habitat chapter here now builds, I think, 10 houses a year. High schoolers go and go to the opening. I've seen the opening where they're sobbing, the cheerleader sobbing, and the single mom with her 2 kids is sobbing. She's got a house. I mean, philanthropy is a learned behavior, and we should learn a lot from the younger generation because they're doing where we're writing checks and doing financial transactions. So that's also a crutch, I think, a little bit for, I've had parents do charitable gifts in honor of their kids' activism. And we should remember that too. That's not a bad lesson. So the philanthropy, the joy of being a philanthropist is huge and should not be underestimated and undervalued. It just should not. Many people say, I want to do for somebody what somebody did for me. I got to tell you this quick story because I just remembered this the other day and it was so joyous to remember. There was a woman who lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who called when I was at the foundation. And I drove up to see her, and she was an artist, her house in the woods, beautiful. I was there in the early evening dusk, all wooded glass, art on all available surface. She had a show down at the gallery. Here's her story. She wants to go to art school in the Depression. I said, how'd that go over with the parents? But if you watch public TV like me, you know, a lot of the women in the back room at Disney, a lot of the artists were women who could never get advanced, but they were doing a lot of work. So there were jobs for women, but the Depression. So she's in her second year out of 3. And she's going to have to drop out. It's bad. And somehow or other, for no reason that she knows, she gets $100 scholarship, and that allows her to stay in school that semester, if you can believe what I'm saying. The next year, she gets another $100 scholarship. She becomes an artist. She said, I want to do for somebody what somebody did for me. And she does a $50,000 charitable gift annuity to give that person a dream. That is the way it is. Pay it forward, pay it back. You know, she said, my life has been filled with joy and art because of those two. It cost $200, babe. $200 is what that was. So that we get a lot of joy in our work. We get paid back richly for working with the people we do. All right, Sarah, let's go to the next slide. All right, for the advisors in the room and also the people who do planned giving, seriously, yeah, income tax savings really matter. And I would really get my head around that. The vast majority of all of our donors have non-taxable estates. So whatever we can do in terms of income tax savings, we should be thinking hard about that. That is one reason we do a gift to people where we talk about life stage gifts, because life stage gifts allow you to keep more of your income. You know, that story I alluded, I told a story in the last session about Jack, who came in and said, I'll give the university $200,000. And I said, my job is to make sure it's the smartest gift you could make. And I asked an open-ended question. I've never met you. Are you thinking of selling or disposing of any asset in the next couple of years? To the advisors in the audience, that is a very good question. I've been in the law practice myself. Your client sells the asset, comes in and says, help me hide the income for tax reasons. You know, it's too late. So you can say the very same thing. Are you thinking of selling or disposing of any asset in the next couple of years? That is a marvelous question. And Jack said, funny, you should say that. It happened to be, he had a bank of rental properties. And he puts that, you know, I describe a charitable remainder unit trust. You know, he's going to deed one of those highly appreciated debt-free properties into that CRUT, that charitable remainder unit trust. He's going to do that. And in return, there's going to be a trustee, and he and the missus get 5% off an annually revalued portfolio balance every single year. That is a great way to go into older age. That is part of a diversified portfolio. To have a revocable trust is one thing. To have some gift annuities is one thing. To have a charitable remainder trust is another thing. It can't be a bad thing to have disparate and different sources of income. It cannot be a bad thing. So they do that. And what I didn't say in the last session, he comes back to campus year 2. All right. And what happened is that he deeded the first property. He picked it. I never saw his portfolio. Why should I? I'm a fundraiser. He listed it. We listed it with a real estate company in DC that he liked. Great. I'll be honest. He showed the unit because he was off the deed and everything. We got an offer in 2 weeks. Said, Jack, do you like it? Love it. Sell it. Okay, it's done. All right. He comes back to campus year 2. Comes right down the hall, sits down, and he goes, wow, that actuarial, because for those of you who don't know, when you do a trust like that, when he deeded that highly appreciated rental property into the trust, he paid no capital gains. And the trust was funded with the full value of the property. All right, that's huge. Russell James goes on and on and on about that non-recognition of capital gains, which, we'll be honest, Congress is dinking with, threatening with in the tax proposal. We're all worried about that. More on that later. But as of now, the law says Jack gets the trust with a full fair market value of that property, and he doesn't pay any the capital gains does come out in the character of the income, but we don't care. He doesn't pay a capital gains tax. That's the key. But he also gets an actuarial income tax deduction because it was 2 people, 71, getting 5% off this principal balance. What did the computer tell us? I think 55% of it, he got an income tax deduction because at the end, charitable remainder means charity is going to get something at the end. They won't live forever. All right. So he got that. So he comes and sits down year 2 and he takes a big sigh and says, wow, that actuarial income tax deduction I got, I saved all my military retirement pay last year. And I just sit back because he's doing his own sales call. I don't have to, I mean, that is true. But that deduction allowed him to pocket his military income, immediate more income. He said, and I'll tell you, my wife loves getting that check from the trust. He said, I never took any money out of the rental properties. I put them all back into the units. That's why the appreciation was so high. And capital gains that at that time, federal alone, 28%. So he said, that's why the appreciation was so high. So he said, my wife likes getting a check. She thinks that's pretty fine. I said, it'll keep coming. And I looked at him, I said, you can do it again. That's why in 5 years, he put 3 units in and his new number, not 200,000, was $1 million. So that reduced income tax, you think that doesn't matter? First thing out of his mouth, that actuarial income tax deduction, I kept all my military retirement pay last year. Hope they took a trip. Number 2, the avoidance of additional tax on long-term capital gains. That story just illustrated that as well. He deeded the asset itself. That's why in the last session, I said, go fishing. Keep going fishing. Tell people, if and when you start selling off those farms, if and when you reduce those rental properties, if and when you start transferring properties or selling, if and when you see a stock price you can't live without, if and when your CDs mature. CDs are a different story a little bit, but we'll talk about that. Anyway, the avoidance of additional tax on long-term capital gains. Oh, I forgot to talk about the IRA charitable rollover in the last one. I just remembered. And I thought, I'll try to do that. I'll do it this time. So this is a big one. And let's hope Congress doesn't dink with that. We're all scared a little bit about it. It's coming up in seminar after seminar. So we'll see what happens. But right now, and what's long-term capital gain? I held it a year and a day. A year and a day. Remember when there was that tech bubble when techs rose and fell in a month or 2 or 3? Couldn't do that with this. It's not long-term, short-term. Short-term. That's a whole different story. All right. We don't really have to talk about number 3. But because that we'll get into retirement plan assets later. But this last one I talked about a little bit in the last session. Income tax deduction with retained life estate, and it should say or term of years, my bad, or term of years of personal residence, vacation home, or farm. And why do I say term of years? The famous Bob Sharp was in Indiana 6 or 7 years ago speaking to our plan giving council. And he said, a lot of people know they can only drive out to their vacation home for a few more years. That is very true. That is very true statement when he said that. So retained life estate or term of years. And what does that mean? That means an older person, and I like to say 75 or above. I want to be highly ethical and make sure you really know which way that ship is going for the rest of your days. Because by then you kind of ought to know. If you're downsizing, if you're moving close to the kids, you kind of ought to know by 75 where you're going to land. But for that older person, you know, maybe the kids say, I'm never coming home. You know, I'm not coming back to the farm. I'm just not, or they don't have kids, or the kids are well-to-do, better off than mom and dad. That's very often true. That older person can deed that personal residence, vacation home, or farm directly to the charity. And that includes a church, by the way, a church, and say on the deed, but I get to live there for the rest of my life. And so does, it's the lifetime too of my sister or my brother, somebody of the same generation. Another person, that spouse, siblings are very popular. We've had cohabitators, fine. Handyman, fine. The only key is that they're older, because actuarially it doesn't work out. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, we can't own a piece of real estate, you don't. You're the remainder beneficiary. You don't own it until the life tenant is gone or deeds it to you and says, I'm moving to the assisted living. I'll give you the house sooner, because they can do that. They move off. So that is a really, you don't own it until you own it, and then you could list it, or maybe you might want to use it. If you're at a charity that has a neighbor on either side that is property you could dearly, dearly use, and they're older, I'd go next door and knock on the door. I'd go knock on the door and talk about my charity and say, have you ever thought of, you know, a retained life estate? You live in it as long as what, and then we would have this property to expand, or to build that new clinic, or to build that parking lot that drives you crazy that people are out of the street, whatever it is. It's not, if you do not ask, the answer is always no, but it's a very, very cool idea. And maybe you could even buy it on a bargain sale, who knows? So income tax deduction with retained life estate or term of years of personal residence, vacation home, or farm only. And my advice in the last session was, if you're a member of a church or a synagogue, excuse me, next time go up to your religious leader and ask, has anybody said someday you're going to get my house? And if they're older, talk about this idea. Talk about, it's an income tax deduction she or he can use instead of an estate tax deduction that is squandered and unneeded. Which would you rather have? All right, you can go to the next one, Sarah. Gift and estate tax save. Oh, Joey.
Pamela, I'm sorry to interrupt. James had a question. I believe it was going back to the properties in DC, if that was the same as a flip trust.
We didn't, you know, that is a great question, James. And now that I think about it, it was just at the very beginning of the flip trust idea. We knew we were going to sell it immediately. We knew, because DC, every 2, 4, 6 years, there's a whole new market, right? We knew the market. So it was right at the beginning of that, the net income only. But he is absolutely right. You should always take real estate into a net income only with flip provision, so you can flip it to a straight. Now, he did other real estate transactions, so maybe it was a flip trust, but when do you flip it? Because he kept adding real estate to it. You know what I mean? So I want to say it was a straight unit trust, because we knew the market was so potently hot out there in DC. But James is spot on. Net income only unit trust, you take no risk. For people who don't know what that means, it means we will only pay out in the first year of the trust either the 5% we promised you or the amount of income the trust earned, whichever is less. And it's to protect a property from not selling in a year's time and having a fire sale, or giving back 5% of the undivided fractional interest in the asset. So it's a protection device to protect against distributions that nobody wants to have happen. Yeah, so James, that's a great question, Joey, and I'm glad you chimed in with that. Great one. All right, gift and estate tax savings. Lifetime charitable lead trust, very popular. They have increased in popularity, I should say. Here, they take big rollers. Yeah, most people who do them have millions of dollars that they put in. It isn't a modest person's trust idea most of the time. But here's what a lead trust does. I put money into a lead trust. Instead of me or my kids getting the income, which is for a term or life, which is the way a remainder trust works, instead, lead trust means charities get the income for whatever the stipulated trust term is, 3, 5, 7, 10, 12 years. At the end of the lead trust time, the lead trust ends and the assets are returned hardly ever to the donor, usually to the donor's children, to give them appreciated assets that have a lower tax bill because of the intermediate charitable term. That's it in a nutshell right there. So it's a bit, most people who do them are, high rollers and whatever, but they love it coming back at the end. Now, there can be basis issues at the end when the children get things out of the trust. What was the activity in the trust? What's the basis? There can be issues, blah, blah, blah. But people like them because it's a way to make your kids wait for inheritance till they're old enough to appreciate it, need it, are retiring themselves. It's really kind of a brilliant way. And for people that have a campaign commitment, that lead trust term, or campaign want to make significant gifts, what a cool way to do that, knowing that the assets come back to the family. So it's a sophisticated idea. I personally have only been involved with one. That's how rare they can be, but they've gone up in popularity because people have more wealth and can investigate those. So advisors, that's something where the income tax breaks are not nearly as great. It's a grant or trust if you get an income tax deduction, and that can sting you at some point, particularly if they change the rules. So Uchi, you have to do it right because there's several different variations. So I think I've said enough about that. All right, how else can I have gift in estate tax savings? Through lifetime charitable gifts and testamentary provisions. One thing I want to say about that is in the Midwest, I find an appalling few number of people of wealth who make annual gifts to their kids. And that's one of the smartest ways. Our 3 kids had Roth IRAs before the age of 10. They all 3 did. So I'm amazed about that because we should be encouraging people to throw off more. And if for no other reason than to find out how your kids handle money. Because what if you called up the kid one day, and said, I'm going to make a gift to you of $10,000 this year. You would feel very differently about a child who said, I paid off a credit card, put some money in the kids' 529s, and we're going to take a week-long trip to Chicago because we can drive. You'd feel, versus the kid who said, thanks, my boat payment's overdue. I mean, you would feel differently about how to plan for those kids based on that. So you might also make an annual gift as a run up the flag trial balloon. I'm amazed people don't do that more and don't figure out how their kids really handle money and if they're trustworthy, the effect of the spouse and all that stuff. It's a good thing. So we can absolutely do lifetime charitable gifts and testamentary provisions. And I will tell you, I want to talk about this lifetime charitable gifts because I have a perfect story to describe with this. There's a guy who lived in my town, Dick, and he's just my poster boy of all charitable gifts. And Dick was a single guy, never married, called me when he was like 67, 68, maybe his advisor got in contact with us. Anyway, inside his will, he had a testamentary charitable unit trust. He said, when I die, marshal my assets, put it in this charitable unit trust, pay 5% per life divided between the 2 people I love most, my partner and my sister. And when it's gone, you. Okay, great. So I knew about that. So Dick and I were pals. So when he's 69 and a half, he calls me and he says, dang it, the IRS is going to force me to take a retirement plan distribution next year. I don't need it, but I might. Now, fundraisers in the room, he said, I don't need it, but I might. So if you're thinking, oh, I'll just say you can make a gift, that, no, I don't need. In the Midwest, our motto is a rainy day, it is a coming. We pack down nuts for the winter up here. It's coming. So I said to him, you could do that trust. He said right away, gee, that sounds complex. What else have you got? Andre Denikian, Leslie, you know the great Andre Denikian, gone to his great reward. Andre Denikian scolded our Plan Giving Council decades ago. He said, you're all in love with these charitable remainder trusts. 9 out of 10 people will pick a gift annuity over a trust because even wealthy people like simplicity and fixed income. Words to the wise. Words to the wise. Spot on. So he said, Dick said, gee, that trust sounds complex. What else have you got? Because he'd also have to pay trustee fees, which Hoosiers are totally morally opposed to. So that's a big problem right there. So gift annuities, I took him 9 calculations. That's the guy I took 9 to. The current payout, defer a year, defer 2 years, 0.5% down, 1% down, defer 4 years, whatever. He looks at all 9. He says, I pick 4-year deferrals. So the next year he gets his mandatory RMD. He pulled required minimum distribution. He comes over funds 2 gift annuity contracts. The first contract says, in 4 years, I, Dick, the donor, get income, and only if I'm gone does my sister get it. And the second contract says, in 4 years, I, Dick, the donor, get income, and only if I'm gone does my partner get it. So he does twin contracts. That's exactly the right thing to do. He calls me up the next spring, January. He says, love it, love it, love it. Didn't defer long enough. And this is the guy who waited 1 day into 6 months before his birthday. I knew exactly the day every year he was coming into fund. I knew it. 1 day, because if you're within 6 months of your next birthday, you've achieved it. So 1 day in to that 6 months, here he comes. The next year, he says, I didn't defer it long enough to defer 6. The third year, that fall, I'm sitting in his condo in Florida. And I said, did you say Sears retirement plan? He said, yes, I did. I said, is that your largest portfolio asset? And he said, yes, I did. It is. I said, oh, Dick, for you, you can kiss that puppy goodbye, because then in the state of Indiana, 9 taxes levied against the retirement plan of a single person died. 9. Can you believe what I'm saying? 9. The color drains from his face. A piece of cake to fix by the time he gets to Bloomington. The beneficiary designation now on his Sears retirement plan says the charitable remainder trust created in my last will and testament. Tax exempt. Brilliant. All it took was a beneficiary designation change to change everything. I see him the last time I see Dick. I love the opera. I've already been to the Magic Flute. It was glorious. I don't miss one. I see Dick at the opera a few years ago. I rushed down to see, and we just visit and hug and kiss and carry on and whatever. And afterwards, his partner has died. Afterwards, I called up John, who took my job at IU Foundation. I said, are you friends with Dick? Yes, I am. I said, go talk to him about a retained life estate. He'll do it. He converted every bit of his portfolio at the right time into diversified income, less management. Brilliant. How much more did his scholarship fund grow? Probably doubled because of that wisdom. There are smart ways to do things. So these lifetime charitable gifts are powerful, powerful, powerful. It's not like I'm making a gift and walking away. I'm giving in a gift annuity. I get more income than I could ever earn myself. How is that a bad thing? And I can stand up at church or wherever it is, at the Habitat meeting, at the women's shelter meeting, and said, here's what I've done. You should do it too. That's a great idea. Nothing wrong with that. All right. That trust provisions, we've already talked about, Jack. The best tax provisions come when just a husband and wife are income beneficiaries of a trust. And you ought to know that. Advisors in the room. Yes, you can add children on to get income after their parents' demise. People used to like to do that 5 or 10 years. Not great tax effects. However, with this huge, huge, huge exemption amount, maybe it won't matter. Maybe it's something you can afford to be counted as tax, but pay no tax on. Only your accountant knows for sure on that one. I'm just saying. But the optimal plan from the charity's perspective and from the tax gods are where the donor and spouse are the only income beneficiaries. The children have their own income arrangement elsewhere. All right, let's go to the next slide. Increased income, charitable gift annuity. We've talked about that. And by the way, when you talk about gift annuity, always say it's only been around since 1831. That is always my first sentence about it, because that is like the good housekeeping seal of approval. Only been around since 1831. It's a Ron Brown, our friend Ron Brown, has a story of the history of the gift annuity starting at Yale University. I've heard him give that talk. He has a pamphlet. You can read about it. 1831. But much more income for older people. We should be, and CDs, I mentioned in the last section, the leading investment choice in America. We ought to be asking, I don't know anything about you, but if you have CDs, next time you have one mature, ask me to run numbers for you on these, because you'll be shocked, surprised, amazed, and delighted at what you see. And remember, said it in the last session, don't assume that the ACGA rate is the only one. Get, like with Dick, give them some choice, because if the market tanks, their charitable fund tanks too. And maybe that will upset them, and maybe that will upset the family. So we ought to put it out there on the table and say, you want to take 1% less to make sure the market hit isn't as potent. That you choose what you will. We should give people choice. I totally believe. And the remainder trust, we've talked about that. Why do I keep saying 5%? That's the only payout. I don't care if you're 90, 5% is the only payout. Leslie, think of all the time we used to spend negotiating payout rates. It's been 5% for so long, and we don't negotiate anymore. We're done with those days, because 5% you gain three ways. I can tell the donor gains. It's a donor driven. Number one, they get the largest deduction when they fund it, because they've taken the least amount of income for themselves. So largest income tax deduction. Number two, if the market grows, it has the greatest potential for growth, because you're not paying out everything, you're allowed more reinvestment of excess income. And number three, it is a greater chance the trust will survive if the market tanks, because you've taken as little income as you can. It's a three-way winner. So advisors, 5% all day long. I don't care if they're 90, because everybody wants growth. I remember the study that said people who see growth in a charitable trust are far more likely to add more funding or repeat the experience. So we can help that by choosing the right payout rate, which is irrevocable once chosen. So you can't mess it up. 5%. When to give my pitch for that? We can have tax sheltered lifetime income in some ways. That's a little harder to achieve, but it can be achieved from a charitable plan. Supplemental retirement income. I think I've talked about that all day long. Dick's deferred charitable gift annuities, he started funding them at age 70 and a half. All right. Later in life, he had lots of supplemental retirement income because of that. That is a brilliant idea, to fund those. With the RMDs he was forced to take. Perfect. Asset management, diversification. Honestly, we do not give that enough nod. You know, my dad had dementia later in life, and my stepmother, who was much younger, had Huntington's disease. Who's going to manage that portfolio? Please tell me. You know, Dad was buying Goldman Sachs when it was going down the tube, because banks had always been good to him. You know, we should really think about that. And by the way, for any of you with aging parents that you're worried, here's my secret of how to find out what's happening, because my parents never were forthcoming about a darn thing. Go up to their house, make them a great dinner, and then run into the place where they keep their mail. Sort their mail. I found my dad was only $15,000 in arrears on lake frontage property at Lake Wawasee. His neighbor was Eli Lilly. He was only two payments behind. Found a little home equity line on grandma's condo. Who knew any of that? Examine their mail. That's my advice to you. Peek at their mail, because that's how I found out everything, because he never said a thing. All right. Asset management, diversification. We ought to think about that a heck of a lot more. Simplify, simplify, simplify. And financial support of family members and friends and ourselves. Hello. We're talking about that all day long. So these donor benefits are huge, huge. And we can tailor the gift plan that mix and matches which sort of that comes out. Just with Jack, the story of the rental properties, actuarial income tax deduction, Non-recognition of capital gains of the trust was funded with more. In exchange, a portfolio that gave him professional management advice with an increasing, opportunity to hedge against inflation. I mean, all of those came, and oh, by the way, the legacy, because the Marching Hundred band was very important to Jack. Donors do cry. I bet a lot of you see donors cry. Okay, so that's our romp through donor benefits. And I thought we ought to do that before we now go to cues and clues, dance marathon. Isn't that the truth, Laura? That is just it changes lives. It changes lives. There's no question. Okay, let's go on to our cues and clues then. Oh, yeah, we've already talked about those. Let's go to okay. So the entree to this presentation about cues and clues is that donors and prospects often tell you what they're concerned about. I always call it their perceived impediments to giving. I would love to give to your campaign, but listen to what comes after the but most of all, because that's the magic in the sauce. And we hear that all the time. They perceive it as an impediment to giving. Development's role is to listen to those and attempt to move the process along with a gift conversation that addresses those perceived impediments. As I say to my husband, I want to be listened to. So donors feel exactly the same. Listen to me. This is I've got bigger fish to fry. When I go out and speak, I always say to the audience, I love charity plenty much. And I volunteer way too much and up to my eyebrows and all that stuff. But I love my family, my 3 kids and my husband more. And I hope you do too. And if you don't, I feel bad for you because they matter more, and taking care of them is number 1 on my list. So it's better be in the framework of what I really, really care about. And that's people I love. So a planned gift can meet, even exceed expectations. Look at Jack's story. Oh, and here's the thing I didn't tell you about Jack that's so important. When he sat down and he told me about the 200,000, and I said, my job is a smart gift. He said, funny, you should say that, the properties, and he's added, and my wife told me last year to unload them because she didn't want to be a landlord anymore. And I said to him immediately, in this office, the marital mandate is number 1. I never met her. But she was the power behind the throne, and he didn't do anything because capital gains were 28%. So he had a reason not to. As the capital gains tax rates go up, good for us. Good for us if they don't recognize that gain. It'll be a great day for us. So that was the impetus. The marital mandate was really number 1, and I just happened to have the solution to the problem. That is it in a nutshell. And my open-ended question, I've never met you. Are you thinking of selling or exchanging of anything in the next few years? That is a winner chicken dinner question. It can just open everything. Okay, so a planned gift can meet, even exceed expectations, but the details and timing are essential, as is motivation. So that's what I say. I often say to people, don't sell anything till you talk to me. I don't really have to go into I always say the IRS wants you to pay tax, I promise you. I mean, really, you don't have to go on with a technical description. That's it. Call me before you sell anything. The IRS always wants you to pay taxes. It's a perfect entree-vous to remembering what to do. It just doesn't have to be complex because people glaze over very quickly. Did you read that article about 5 or 6 years ago that the eye time on a newspaper column is like 5 seconds or 8 seconds? It's so tiny, I can't even believe it. So reporters have to say something in the first sentence or they're doomed. I mean, can you even believe that? Our attention span is that short, but really, really is. So I try to keep it simple with donors. I just always say, call me. Call me, call me. I'm always saying that, call me. I can't wait to, and I have often said, call me if you want to help a charity other than mine. I don't care, call me. We just want you to be a happy donor who has it done correctly. That's it. I mean, that's worth its weight in gold, and they don't take you up on it that much, but they have. All right, I think we're ready for the next slide, Sarah. So what are some of these impediments to giving? Well, let's look at some of the most common. And our mission, we said it before, the role of the gift planner, the role of the advisor. The advisor, you know, advisors, philanthropy is huge in Indiana. It really, really is. The Midwest is a core value. Riley is just one. You know, our community, Lilly Endowment has given 6 matching gift programs to Indiana community foundations to get gifts in rural communities. That is transformative in so many ways. But so our mission really is to ask many, would you consider making a planned gift if I could show you how? That's really, really it in a nutshell. And if I fail, you're off the hook. And that's how I always say it. I mean, it really is. You'll learn something. No question about it. You'll be glad we spent our time together and you had that. And I always say in marketing, it works for our charity and every other one you care about. I think that's huge. I think that's huge. So advisors, if you think when you call St. Jude's, you call our friend Leslie, you call our friend Sarah from the Jewish Foundation, if you call them, they're going to say, oh, you better direct your gift here. You could not be more wrong. Before you all joined the call, they were talking about swapping people back and forth who were facilitating gifts to other charities, because nobody gives just to one that we know. So let them be a facilitator. And if they know the stuff, they know the stuff. No question. Sarah, I bet it does that because of the hour Zoom thing. I'm going to say it does that. But it could be something else. So I can tell you what the first of those, of course, I've put my page in a different order. All right.
I'm back.
No, you're doing great. You're great.
I'm going back.
All right.
We were
So-
here, but I think you now want to advance.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I want to, yes, advance another. All right. Here's the first one. You're sitting with a donor or a prospect and they say, oh my goodness, I'm so worried about income. How long will I live? I have to make sure. My dad was very concerned about income for his much younger wife. Rightly so. I need to grow it. And CD rates are so low. Remember, they're the leading investment choice in America. I predict every one of you have heard this a comment uttered by a prospect, a client, or a donor. Every single one, because we do live so long. My grandmother lived to 97 and a half in her own home, smoking, drinking, and cooking. She took a trip to Ireland at age 96, and that fall attended Notre Dame football games. And it's brutal out there in that stadium. She only died because she stopped eating by choice. We were there when she unfolded her plan. But, you know, she never expected to live that long. Trust me. When my income lasts till I'm 97 and a half, she had a generous son. That was a good thing. All right. So what are we going to say? Here's our job, to listen to what they say and say something, because our goal is to move the gift conversation, the planning conversation along. That's our goal, not to have the answer to everything, but to move it along, to not let it die on the vine. And I would say to advisors, I often say when I do CE programs, instead of just clucking with sympathy about the CD rates, we've got an answer for you. So Sarah, we're ready for the next. So you say, there are charitable gift plans that pay income to people. Hey, that's a new piece of news. Both a simple plan, that's a gift annuity, and a more complex one, that's a trust. I don't know much more about it than that, but may I have a person contact you to talk through those options? That's the contact with the Jewish Foundation. We heard about the Christian Foundation and the Community Foundation. You have 3 different options to sit down and talk to before you go out and have these conversations to say, what can you do for us? Can we refer people to you? Do you know more about this than we do? And if not, who do you suggest that we use? Whatever it is, I don't know the strength of their expertise, but if it's there, they'll do it for you. This is it. They're charitable gift plans that pay income to people, both a simple plan and a more complex one. I don't know much more about it, but I have someone talk to you about it. That's it. That's all you need to say. Am I right about that? Am I right? I hope so. All right, let's look at the next shared sentiment. That's number 1 in what you hear. Income concerns. It's number 1, and rightly so. Let me see if I can move that. Oh, never mind.
Wrong one?
Yep. Well,
Go back one.
Yep. All right. The prospect says, let me see if that's the next one. Yes. The prospect says, that's page 11. Yeah. The prospect says, oh, here's Jack. I don't want to manage a rental property anymore. My wife said, get out of the business. Or a farm. Farms take a lot of work. I want to work less, but boy, I sure need that income. And I'm concerned with having to pay capital gains tax, meaning less to invest. That is the Midwestern mantra. Paralysis into doing nothing because fear of taxes. And I will tell you, a lot of people's tax information is old. You know, they think their kids are going to be taxed on the farm they leave to them. Not if it, generally not. That's an estate asset unless they have over that exemption. So they think the retirement plan asset they have will not be taxed to children. That's wrong too. It will be for income tax state, income tax federal, and ACA tax, who knows what else. But this is very true. The prospect might say, I need to simplify my life. It's just too hard to manage all of this stuff. I need to reduce my management, my work, all that stuff. So what's going to be our answer to this person?
Can we go to the next slide?
Yep. I didn't say that, did I?
No, it's okay.
So it's easy. Here it is again. They're charitable gift plans that pay income to donors, both a simple and a more complex one. It's the same line. Those should be funded with the appreciated asset itself for maximum tax advantage. There's that extra line. Don't sell. That's what that says. Don't sell. You could say, don't sell it. I don't know much more about it, but I have someone contact you. Okay, let me tell a story about this one. Years ago, I went up to a county foundation and made a presentation and got contacted by the smartest Parks and Rec guy ever, William. And William said, we are in a situation right now where we want to do a county park before our whole county gets developed. And we floated an article in a little county paper and said, is anyone interested in having their farm so used? And this farm family came forward and we think it's perfect. And we haven't put pen to paper at all. We're still talking about this and that, but it's 184 acres. And they're going to, because we tried to partition it, we really couldn't. They're going to keep living in the farm building right next door. So it's going to be partitioned and the buildings are going to be separated and we're going to take the rest of the acreage for the park. But we haven't written a thing down. And he says, should we be having a gift conversation with these people about that? Isn't that a great question? And advisors, that is a great question. So, you know, hearken, I just love that. And I said, oh yes. So I drive up to that county and here's the farm family and the accountant is there. Neither the accountant nor the attorney had ever done a charitable plan, I don't believe, in their life, because he looked like a deer in headlights the whole time. Okay. So I said to them, well, you know, you have options with this farm. You can sell it to the Parks Department. You know, they want it. They responded. So you can sell it if you want to. It's your prerogative, but you do have other options. I said, you own 100% of that 184 acres. Undividable interest. I said, any debt, please, they're Hoosiers. No. So I said, you could carve that up and do different things with pieces in it. And I said, let me ask you this question first. Are you thinking of naming anything at the park? Now that is a slam dunk question because they're going to live next door, you know? She said, well, we'd like to name this shelter house. I said, beautiful. I said, now why in the world would you sell this to the parks and then write them a check to make a charitable gift? That just, and after you pay capital gains. I said, that just seems crazy to me when you're telling me you want to make a charitable gift. So here's how it unfolded. They ended up doing 4 deeds. All right. Deed number 1, mom and dad deeded 2% of the undivided fractional interest in their, it was 134 acres, excuse me, 134 acre farm to the local community foundation to the Parks Foundation in return for a naming gift for the shelter house. I said to him, great, now you're not going to get 2% of the money, but you're going to deduct 2% of the sale price and as an income tax deduction. So that's a very good thing. You made a pre-tax charitable gift. That's the optimal situation. That is very true. It is foolish to sell, pay tax, gift. That is foolish if you can afford it. Okay, gift number 2. We talked about all these arrangements. We don't need to go. Deed number 2, they deeded 15% of the undivided fractional interest in the 134 acres to the local community foundation in exchange for a 6% charitable gift annuity for mom and dad. I leaned over and said, what's great about this is you'll never have to renegotiate the rate. It's 6% for CDs, you renegotiate the rate. Delighted. Now we've given mom and dad income and they get an actuarial income tax deduction on that. It was worth 55% of the value of the farm, just like Jack's. Okay, they say to us, I have 5 children. We have 5 children. I said, no problem. Deed number 3, they deeded 30% of the undivided fractional interest in their 134 acres to a 20-year, 5% charitable remainder trust, paying income to their 5 children. To their 5 children. Brilliant. I did now. Their children get income at a time when mom and dad are around to know it. And they sold the remainder to the parks for 53%. How is that not a good plan? That is a great plan. And I will tell you, Bob leaned over and said to me, when my parents died, I inherited quite a bit of farmland. How that would have helped us when we were raising our 5 children on that plot of land. Our annual farm income was $15,000 a year. That's why I worked for county government and my husband drove a school bus. That's how you make it. I mean, so she so got the value of throwing off income. So their charitable incomes that pay income to donors, both a simple and more complex one. I said donor, I should have said to people because I just said kids too. They should be funded with the appreciated asset itself. Every one of those gifts was by a percentage of the deed for income tax breaks, for non-recognition of capital gain, for funding arrangements with a higher value than their cost basis. That is the way to do it. May I have somebody talk to you about it? So there are ideas out there like that, and it doesn't have to be 100%. That's why I wanted to share that story. You think, I don't want to give 100% of my farm to the charity. You don't have to, as long as you're on the same page of let's join hands, link hands and sell at the same time or have a plan. I will tell you the rest of that park story. It was so novel for this county. I had to drive back to that county, huge meeting, all the Parks Foundation board, the community foundation leadership, the county attorney who represented the Parks Department. There were 25 people, 30 people in that room, and the attorney and the accountant for the couple. And I went through the whole thing, and the county attorney got up at the end and he said, when we acquire property for government, we acquire 100%. And bam, you're asking us to acquire 2%, 15%, 30%, and buy out 53%. And he paused and he said, but dang, this is such a good idea. We're going to do it. So they did it because at the end of the day, a lot of those gifts came back to the community. Where does the gift annuity go at the end? Where does the charitable remainder trust go at the end? Where does the 2% go at the end? Okay, it comes back to the community. So they did it. All right, that's a long story, but it's a rich one. Isn't it rich? I should tell you, I saw the attorney at a CLE program I did, about 4 years ago. And he said there was trouble in Denver Hills that had to do with management of one of the players in the group setting. So I was traumatized to hear it, but that's locality sometimes. All right, just so you know, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but the execution of the plan was great. Okay, now we're ready to go to the next one, Sarah. All right, shared sentiment. The prospect, you hear him say, oh, I just don't know how much longer we can drive out to Colorado, and the children do not want, or they have no children. This comes up. So the next slide, Sarah, what are we going to say to them? There are charitable plans funded with such appreciated assets that pay income to you or others, or a gift can be made of property like that now but you get to live there for the rest of your life or a term of years, often with great tax breaks. That's a pretty clunky sentence, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm trying to get to the idea they can gift it, they can put it into a trust like Jack did, or they could do a retained life estate. Either one, either one, depending on their needs. But that, so it's clunky, I get it, but it says there are options with such real estate. You can live there for a while and have charity take it over, or you can convert it into income. That's really what I'm saying in a clunky way. I don't know much more about it, but may I have a person contact you about that? Very same story. This woman, Louise, she and her husband were giving $1 million to a chair in urology at IU. We talked to, his name was Norbert. We talked to Norbert for 7 years about a charitable ranger trust. He calls me one fall and says, I'm going to do one of those things. And I said, are you talking annuity trust or unit trust? Now, I failed Norbert here because I should have said, are you talking fixed income or variable? But I used the term. So it's my fault. He answered the way he did. He said, well, explain those to me again. And I thought, my gosh, we've gone over, 7 years. But I said, ethically, I said, Dr. Welch, you should not fund an irrevocable arrangement if you still have basic questions. So I suggest you go to Arizona and come back in the spring and we do it then, because we obviously have not done a very good job explaining what this arrangement is, and it's irrevocable, and we want you to be very, very happy. Now, I didn't know this. He needed to make an outright gift, made a gift that fall of $45,000 to the School of Medicine. This couple was so amazing. Every year they fully funded whatever the annual gift amount was for their 4 grandchildren, their son, daughter, both doctors as well in Indiana, and their spouses. They put, when it was 10,000, they put the annual gift amount every single year in accounts for those 8 people. So the grandkids' college education was totally paid for by the time they reach. What a burden to take off their parents. I mean, they were amazing. Their portfolio didn't stink for a long time. They were amazing people. There's amazing people. Anyway, so Dr. Welch comes back the next year, does the trust. He drives out to Arizona the next year, that fall, has a heart attack in Missouri and dies. I go to the funeral in Southern Indiana. Both the son, the daughter, the wife all come up and say, we're going to fulfill Dad's $1 million pledge to the chair. We're going to do it. And Louise had a house out in Green Valley, Arizona, that she only drove out to 3 more years, barely over the steering wheel. So perfect gift to help on the pledge for the $1 million, don't you think? Perfect. Retain life, a term of years, through 3 more years, then you get the house in Green Valley, Arizona. Perfect way to help her satisfy that pledge and still use it as long as she can drive out. So I would be if anyone mentions vacation homes, I'd be thinking about this possibility. All right, Sarah, I think we're ready for the next one. The prospect says they're supporting an older generation. I'm supporting mom and dad. I just can't help right now. I have to wait till that goes on. Come back to me with the campaign ask at that time. You know how it is. No question. Wait a minute, Sarah. I think I could. Okay. Yes. All right. So they have to do that and can't make that gift now because they have to make sure they've taken care of mom and dad. So what's our answer to that? All right. There's a charitable plan called Charitable Gift Annuities, around since 1831, paying often higher than market rates for life to older people. You could fund one for that older generation, providing income to them and very attractive tax breaks for you. Can someone come and talk to you about that? I had this very situation, was one of the first gift I ever did when we did gift annuities. Stockbroker's son in California. Mom and dad lived in the Midwest, 83 and 84. He has no siblings, no wife. He's supporting mom and dad and they need his help. All right, that's a really tough situation to do your estate planning in. You know, you got to do a trust. It really is complex because he's not going to leave his estate to mom and dad 83 and 84. So we have this mailer, you know, featuring gift annuities. He carries it around in his briefcase for a year before he calls. You know, that's why you repeat, because you never know when someone's ready to hear your message. Long and short, He ends up sending $50,000 in highly appreciated stock to IU, where mom graduated from, and to an Ohio university where dad graduated from. He called me after he transferred the stock, I'm sorry, and he said, shouldn't I just make mom the IU beneficiary? Won't that give me a higher income tax deduction? I said, yes, it would, but it hardly counts. And who gives a darn about that? Because now you deprive the survivor of income for the rest of your life. I said, an income tax deduction is a one-time only event and income is forever. Always tip your advice towards the donor. That's the right advice. Is a one-person gift annuity better for our IU Foundation? Yes. Is a two-parent charitable gift annuity better for that loving son? Definitely. So he does both of that. Both Ohio and Indiana has that. And now at the time, this is no longer true. The rates were much higher. Mom and dad got 9% from those gift annuities. They wouldn't get that now. No, warning, warning, higher rates then. 9%. The son, for the 100,000 he put into the 50-50 arrangements, he deducted $75,000 because their advanced age made his deduction ginormous. He couldn't believe it, and the gain flowed out in the income yield to his parents. He called me up and he said, that's $9,000 my parents don't have to ask me for every year. That's golden. He said, but I'll tell you what I cared about even more than the income, because I could have managed that. He said, I told mom and dad they can each pick the ultimate use of that gift at their college. I wanted to pay tribute to them when they were still alive to know it. We ought to float that idea a heck of a lot more. Isn't that beautiful? He said they were the greatest parents ever. I'm their only child. I just love that story so much I can't even tell you. So he said, but the tax breaks for me, ooh la la. He said, I could not earn that money. And he also said, that was dog stock and I knew it had to go. I would have unloaded it anyway. It was dog stock. That's what he called it. I now call it dog stock because I hit. So there's a charitable plan called Charitable Gift Annuities around since 1831. Use that to support mom and dad. Make it a tribute gift during their life. Let them pick the ultimate use of the fund at our charity. What a beautiful thing. And you will love it so much. You'll probably want to repeat the experience and have me come out and talk to them about it. I mean, really, it's exactly that way. Don't you think? It's incredible. All right, let's go to the next one. Oh, good. We're doing fine. The prospect says, gee, I have a concern. I have a child with issues. Could be financial, substance, even in-law issues. And how do I protect their inheritance? And here you're sitting here thinking, the advisors in the room hear this. And the rest of you are thinking, I'm not an advisor. What do I know about any of this stuff? That's beyond my pay grade, whatever. And I don't want you to think this is legal advice. Here's the tenet of the response to this on how to protect the children. You want to go to the next slide, Sarah? There are charitable plans to pay income to younger heirs while protecting a portfolio from creditors and also enjoying market activity. So potential for future growth and more income. That's a beautiful sentence. That's not clunky at all. I kind of love that one. There are charitable plans to pay income to younger heirs while protecting a portfolio from creditors and also enjoying market activity. So potential for future growth and more income. That's exactly what they want to hear. I don't know much more about it than that, but can I have someone contact you, even run numbers for you? That's the first time you've seen that, but that's not, when I worked at the IRS, Estate and Gift Tax Division under Ronald Reagan, I learned that numbers are very compelling. That's my takeaway from this, is numbers are very compelling and people like to see what their numbers are going to look like. So the scenario for this, we're going to go to the next slide in a minute, Sarah, not quite yet. The scenario for this is that there was a board member at IU Foundation, and he's kind of well known because I hope you have all seen the movie Breaking Away. And if you haven't, write that down because it's family fare from grandma to grandchildren. You will love it. It is a beautiful movie. And it's about a bike race that is held every year here in Bloomington to raise money for working students. And this guy, Howdy was his name, he's passed away, so I could talk about it. Howdy was the one who went to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Indianapolis 500, and said, may we borrow little 500 for that bike race. This was the man who did that. And that's no small feat. I am so sure that's no small feat. So it's called the Little 500, and that's what the movie's about. You should watch it. You will love it. So he called me up one day, and here's the only thing he asked. He said, can creditors reach the portfolio of a charitable remainder trust? Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? Can creditors reach the portfolio of a charitable remainder trust? The answer is no. It's irrevocable once funded. We once had a divorced couple where one tried to sue to get the trust set aside so she could get more in property settlement, and the court wouldn't do that. And that was division between the two benefit. I think they would do that now, but at the time they were sticklers and finicky about it. But this guy, no, you cannot, it's irrevocable once funded. That's why that 5% payout rate is so choice. Oh, and advisors, one other thing, 5% payout on a charitable remainder trust. And be sure to, there's 2 revenue rulings on charitable remainder trust. And one, there's more now. They've redone the forms. They've updated them. They did bad forms, then they did better forms. There's all sorts of stuff out there from the government. But read the optional provision revenue ruling on charitable remainder trust, because an optional provision, and you should always include this, have your client in that trust, remember it's irrevocable once funded, have them retain the power to change what charities share the remainder. Because if they do not retain that power, it is deemed irrevocable and they cannot change. The trustee can substitute a new one if something becomes tax exempt or goes defunct or goes out of business. But always have advisors, your clients in a trust, charitable remainder trust, retain the power to change the charitable beneficiaries. Now, for those in the charitable world, you're like, why is she saying that? And I will tell you ethically, because I've been to every single national conference and I'm going to Orlando on Monday. There was a huge ethical dilemma for a while. Should gift planners tell donors they should retain that power? And the answer is a resounding yes, because it might mean they kick another one off and you've been the ethical person. So it's the right answer all day long. So this guy was worried about that irrevocable provision means you better do the trust right the first time because you don't get to fix it. All right, you don't get to fix it. So that's why I'm going through 5% and retaining that power and reading the optional provisions, protect your client in a good way. And charities, it just means pay attention to them. They tell you they did the trust, keep them on your database, contact them, visit them, treat them like all your other donors. Okay, now, Sarah, we're ready for the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one more. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, so this one, again, the charitable remainder trust is an idea. Can we do gift annuities for young people? No, it's all governed by age. So they have to have enough income to do a trust or forget it. And this guy absolutely did. He worked for City Security. So I knew he did. And he was on the board of the IU Foundation. So he did. This guy said to me, here's what he said. He said, I have 3 sons. 2 are great with money. The third, if he inherits at dawn, is gone at dusk. And he has 2 children of his own. I'm terrified he won't support his sons. That was it. That's my perceived impediment to giving. It's right there. And my friend Laura Dean, here from Hoosier, gave us a great line we should repeat often in these situations. Treating people equally does not mean treating people the same. That is a brilliant line, because he was obsessed with, do I give them the payment or not? So treating people equally does not mean treating people the same. So his advisor called me 2 times because Daddy funded a charitable remainder trust for this spendthrift child who had obviously gone through bankruptcy or creditor problems or something, no question. And the other 2 got their outright interest, but they were treated equally, not the same. And the father was even more brilliant. Howdy, you are an inspiration. He went to his son and said, Howdy, son, I've created a trust that will protect you from yourself. It will always create income, even if creditors come. They'll snatch the income for a few years, but the South, it will rise again and that income will renew and you'll be able to preserve the asset and get out of it to help you. So, and he said, and thank you, son. These arrangements also allowed me to satisfy all my charitable pledges, because he also knew son would go beat up on mom after dad died. How dare he treat me differently, right? So he absolutely headed that off, and I share that information because I just think that is so insightful in terms of family unity. In that estate planning I did for a while with Thompson, there was a family came in and the older son lived out, the parents had 2 children. The older son lived out of state. The younger son lived in town, drove them to their doctor's appointment, knew the banker, everybody. And when they died, they made the younger son the executor, and the older brother refused to ever speak to him again because it should have been him because he was older. All right. I think we ought to encourage our donors to have a sit down, probably with kids, and say, I picked your brother because, I mean, he knew it was the perfect choice. And now the sibling lost his parents and his brother. Okay. It's a bizarre situation, but we don't have to do family dynamics, but I just want to share this guy's story because I found it so astonishing that he warded off family cataclysm in a brilliant way and protected his spendthrift son. When he asked that one question, can creditors reach the the balance? I didn't ask one question about his son. I don't need to. That is personal, painful family business. Don't need to ask a thing. The answer is no, it's protected from creditors. And I've seen people, will it be protected from a bad in-law, daughter-in-law, son-in-law? Yes, it could be. I've had people use a charitable remainder trust for exactly the same thing. I've had them do it in anticipation of a divorce on the horizon, down the road, to take it out as a marital asset. Now, I don't know how that, because it's funded often by the parent, not by the divorcing couple. Okay, but I've seen those things happen. People use it to protect their children in a significant way. And I should tell you that on a charitable remainder trust, this says paying income to younger heirs. If it's younger heirs, it's not going to be income for life, because payments under a charitable remainder trust can be for life or a term of years not to exceed 20. And I want to tell you one funny quick story before we move on to the next slide. So I always promote 20 years, 100%. Howdy chose 20 years. 20 years, that's a lot of time. I'm all for it. 20 years, take the maximum that you can get. I was up in Wisconsin again, meeting with a couple, and they come in, it's a second marriage for both of them. And she's has a health issue, and she cannot wait to get out of Wisconsin and get to their second home in Arizona to warm herself up. You know, she comes in with her cane and she's hunched over and she sits down, and they're maybe only in their mid-70s. They aren't, 90s or nothing like that. So he has a big retirement plan. Again, it's over $2 million. He's been a doctor or something like that. And so I go through all of the charitable remainder trust, because you could set it up. You could change your beneficiary designation like Dick did to say the trust created my last will and testament, and then actually have the trust provisions inside your will and testament, and it'll make it tax exempt. So I go through it with this couple. I said, oh, you could do this with the kids. It's up to 20 years. They can get income for 20 years. That's perfect. And at the end, charities, and there won't be any tax situation for you. State won't be taxed. It'll be great. So I finished with all that. And John, it was John and Mary. And John looks over at Mary and says, Mary, our kids are worthless. I mean, you are the most amazing thing. Our kids are worthless. And she said, you're right, John. She's just agreeing with it right now. I couldn't believe it. He said, they don't deserve 20 years of income, Mary. They'll just fritter away. They'll just make terrible decisions. They're whatever. In the space of 15 seconds, he's talked himself down to 1 year of income for the kids. I mean, is that just the lousiest thing? But at the end of the time, he will decide. But I kept trying to raise the flag for 20 years. And a lot of times I would suggest this in advisors, you might want to do it. Fundraisers, you might want to do it. A lot of times after a contentious meeting like that, I'll write a letter that says, we talked about a tiered remainder trust and it can last for life for a term of years to exceed 20, and 20 is often chosen for children because there's no whatever. In other words, I'm trying to say, I encourage you to take 20. That's what I'm really trying to say, and I don't have to say, you said, no, 1 year. I don't have to put any of that down. I just have to protect my behind that I advocated for the kids. That's it. That's it. So sometimes I sent a little note that just basically reiterated some of the points I'd made, that if it ever come up later that the kids saw the file, they know I did my best. It was their parent who chose differently. Okay, I think we've talked enough about Howdy, don't you? I think we need to go on. And John and Mary, can you believe that? What? Our kids are worthless. That's terrible to hear. Whew. All right. You hear the prospects say, oh, there's the stock price, and boy, do I wish I could cash that in. Or the tenant farmer came on down and said, I want to buy the farm. But again, I'm not going to do anything because I'll have to pay capital gains and it's going up and the government wants more. And so I just haven't done a darn thing. This is a very common thing to hear. When I worked at IU Foundation, Hank Greenspan ran the not the Treasury. Was it the Treasury, Jeff? The Federal Reserve. He ran the Federal Reserve. And so the market only went up and capital gains were 28%. So this was our number one source of funding. We did at least a dozen or more trusts a year. It was the number one source of funding with stock prices. Farms were less so, property was less so, stock prices, because people are much more attuned to a stock value than they are to farms. So I would, if you know people with portfolios, if they talk to you about concern over the tax law because it affects anything they say about portfolio, you could drop this next hint. And let's look at what that next hint is, Sarah. There are charitable plans that can be funded with appreciated assets that pay income to you or others. Or a charitable gift can be made of certain property outright. We've all had people give outright stock gifts to fund, a campaign gift or to fund a scholarship fund, to endow something. We've all seen that happen. So I always put that, do not think an outright gift is not on your playbook list. Do not think that. That's why I put this on here. Certain property outright, they can simplify and diversify your estate. Who could I have call you? Okay, of course I have a story about this one because this is one of my faves, There was a guy who kept calling me from Sioux City, Iowa. He owned a brick company and he had a farm in southern Indiana that was on the Ohio River that he said flooded on a kind of routine number of basis. And his three sons were all college educated, living in cities. And so he's in his 80s and he's obsessed about this Indiana farm, which has been in his family for 184 years. All right, so it's a big old deal. So he calls me, he calls me to pursue ideas, because I always say, call me, let's talk. I don't think I've ever solicited a gift. I just really am an idea maker about technique and idea. They make their own decision about that. I just show them how. The how is really, really important. So this guy told me in his call that he had called his three sons and said, what do I do with the Indiana farm? Oh, Dad, give it to us. Oh, put it in. Well, it's not taxable. Dad, give it to us. And he was obsessed about this farm. He said, he said in one call, that farm will never mean anything more than a portfolio item to my three kids. That really bothered him. So long and short, here's what he decided to do. He made an outright gift of that farm to Indiana University Foundation to fund a scholarship fund for kids from that very poor Indiana county. He said, my gosh, it's been in our family for 184 years. I think we ought to just give it back to them. And when they came to town, for something, I don't remember. They got a fire truck parade in Indiana. It means we assemble our vehicles with flashing lights. The marching band gets a fire truck parade if they go to a state competition. We love our fire truck parades. So the family got a fire truck parade. Now their name is going to be mentioned every single year at senior night from the stage. That legacy of that family is vast, huge, and lasting. The sons just said to Dad, this is the best thing you ever did. This is such a great idea. We're going to be heroes in our hometown. So outright gifts are on the list. Because we can all, I often say to people, is it important for you to witness your largesse now? Are you willing to happen? Wait to let it happen after you're gone? Because that truly is a planned gift question, isn't it? I think that truly, truly is. Do you want to witness your largesse now? Because sometimes they annually fund that. They annually fund it. They do something to start meeting this. We worked with a couple once that every year funded a nursing scholarship and a junior league. They were childless, and there were some of those recipients that became family to them over the years because they all hit it off so well. I remember they said, oh, so-and-so visited us in Arizona with their kids, long past school, but like that artist in Fort Wayne, you made my career possible. I want to thank you again. We're going through Arizona. We'll come see you. So it can be an outright gift, and always have that on your list, or it could be that life income gift like a trust or a gift annuity. And again, 9 out of 10 people will choose a gift annuity for older people than a trust for simplicity. I think that's absolutely true. So if you don't do gift annuities, those 3 community foundations that you have there that can help you, run, not walk to them. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. The prospect says, this is so common. This is so common. Oh, we don't need to have a gift conversation. My estate's all planned and complete. Doesn't need any further review. Oh, of course, I have a story for this too. I can't help myself, but it's so true. I worked in Detroit for a while, and there was a charity that had an auxiliary, and it was filled with the wives of Ford and GM executives before the car situation, when life was a lot more, when the unions were still around. It was a different deal. So there was a queen bee in that group that everyone all next rotated when she spoke. So she was the leader of the band. So we're going to do a session at a gathering on planned giving, and for the auxiliary, because they are just optimal planned gift prospects, and they have capacity. I mean, they're just amazing group. So we're just planning for it. Of course, we have to meet with them, make sure it all fits, copacetic, whatever. So she says in our planning meeting, she says, well, one of the perks the executives of Ford and GM get is the best estate planning money can buy. So she said, we all have the Cadillac of plans. And frankly, Pam, there's nothing you could tell us that we haven't learned or heard about, because they've provided this awesome service. So I am completely undeterred, and I go on and talk about gift annuities. She says, I've never heard of those. I talk about charitable trust. She's never heard of those. I mentioned like 4 things. And at the end, she said, I've never heard of any of those things. I think probably we need this session. Really? So what is our answer, Sarah? Let's see what we're going to say when they say, we don't need a gift conversation. We've got the toniest estate in the state. All right, here's the new one. Now, this at the time, the federal estate tax exemption was 600,000. You know, I didn't use that. I couldn't say the tax. I used to say many times to people like that, the tax man is lying in wait for you. It was one of my favorite things to say. The tax man is lying in wait for you, because there's a lot of truth to that. But here's the response. With the huge federal estate tax exemption, and this is the one who says my plan is done. With the huge federal estate tax exemption, more people are using certain assets at the right life stage to convert those from appreciation to income with very attractive income tax breaks. That's a beautiful line. That's absolutely true. Can I diversify something that either is not producing for me, that I have a buyer in the wings, that I want to sell, that I can't get to anymore? You should all know that when you own property out of state, when you die, my Indiana estate cannot handle, if I had Tennessee property, and I don't, but they could not transfer Tennessee property. Only Tennessee can transfer Tennessee property. So my estate would happen to open a small estate matter in the county in my property was located in Tennessee, simply to transfer that. What if instead I deed it away or use it in some way so I don't have that need of ancillary jurisdiction? What if I simplify my estate during life if I have property out of state? My daughter lives in town in a property that was a guy who was in his 80s, owned 9 rental properties in 3 different states. And he died, and his attorney, in fact, who was his cousin, had to go to every state and deal with all those properties. And ours was the last one. And it had sewage in the basement. He had long given, it was rented, sewage in the basement. He'd long given up. So what a cruel thing to do to her, when he could have said, well, I can at least not have property in 3 states. I can at least get, she had to do the whole, she took a fee for it, but I think that's kind of like an ordeal from hell myself. I think that would be terrible. So that, can I simplify my estate and diversify with something in my portfolio at a life stage gift? And that's what this says. And I would really hang that federal estate tax exemption out there, because it means that the vast majority, I think 99 point some percent of us, do not need the federal estate tax exemption to pay, you know, maybe it's 98, but it's tiny. And with that wealth gap, that inequality, it's even worse. You know, that 11 million isn't for us, it's for someone else, not for us. And with a husband and wife, it's that times 2, you know, and it's indexed for inflation. So it's closer to 12 right now than it is to 11. So yeah, life stage gifts can help you diversify and simplify your life. You know, in my parents' estate, we finally sold grandma's condo. You know, that was after we got assessed for the stucco repair. Al Capone gambled in that former hotel during Prohibition. So that place had quite a history, but quite an age. So we diversified. Now we don't have to pay the monthly assessment fee. Now we don't pay. We did that. People want to simplify their estates, and we can help them do it. All right, Sarah, I think we can go to the next one. I bet you're getting tired of my voice, and I apologize for that. Are there any questions in the chat, Joey, that we should talk about? Okay, Joey says no. Well, come on. It's because you're making that list of all the people you're going to talk to. Because as we're listening to these, I bet you've heard some of these from some people you know in your portfolio, in your database. And honestly, this is a word to the wise. You go fishing, pick up the phone and say, I just heard this word. She made me think of when you said to me, fill in the blank, right? That's all you have to do. That is a perfect, if it came from them, you're just following up on it now because you know what to say, right? All right, so this shared sentiment says the older prospect says that at some future time, your charity will receive her home or farm or vacation property. You know what's coming up here. All right, Sarah, we can go to the next one. We know what's coming up here. Your response. There's a gift plan that lets you deed that property during your life to our charity. You could live there for life for your spouse or siblings too, if relevant, which simplifies your estate and gives you a current income tax deduction. Yeah, we can have a person talk to you about it. Okay, here's my story about this. Older couple up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Margaret and Clinton. They married late in life, had no children. Her father was the neighborhood doctor. They lived in a home in which she had been born. Margaret was a very exciting woman. She worked for Magnavox, the import-export business in Fort Wayne at the time, and they traveled and they ballroom danced until osteoarthritis ended those days. She also had that scleroderma, which causes a thickening of your esophagus. So she was very scared about that too. But they couldn't ballroom dance anymore, so they were pretty much homebound. Now, they were quite the stock investors, and Clinton, who was called Ting, loved to tell the story of Margaret when she was earning her own income. She decided she was going to buy her own car, and it was going to be a Nash automobile. Now, many of you have never heard of the Nash automobile, N-A-S-H. Look it up. It was a car of limited production. And Indiana is very, very, very influential in automotive production and technology. So we have a rich history here. Studebaker up the road, more than that. So anyway, she's going to buy a Nash. And her father and Ting say to her, Margaret, that's a terrible car. Don't buy that car. We don't want you to buy it. So Ting takes Margaret's carefully saved $4,000 and buys a stock that at the end of their life was worth $2.5 million. He said, I want to tell you the lost opportunity cost of a Nash. I mean, it was really a great, great story. So they had no children. They'd lived in Fort Wayne for a long, long time. Where to leave your estate? I mean, what are your options in that situation? And I don't even remember they're talking about relatives. So she decides she's going to leave $1 million for research in osteoarthritis, which has ended her ballroom dancing career. And that's a darn good decision. Why not put it in medical research? And out of that million for IU, 100,000 of it is getting left in Fort Wayne because IU has medical centers all over the state where they put students to train in community. So she says, I'm going to leave $100,000 here as my gift to Fort Wayne. Wonderful. So we go see them, David Smith and I, from the School of Medicine, and she goes up these rickety linoleum. Remember the linoleum strip with the metal strip and the ridges on the end, the tiny little stairs that they used to have in those tiny little houses. She goes up those stairs. We're watching her with great fear. She comes down and she throws her income tax return in my lap. They have paid $40,000 that year in income taxes because all they have is passive income, dividends, interest. They have no deductions, nothing. Now, we had said to Margaret, you should consider making your $1 million gift during your life because you have all the income in the world and you could afford to do it. It was, her gift was going to be of GE stock, which was holier than holy in Fort Wayne, and you could not sell it during your life because it was disloyal. So she says, I cannot give you the $1 million gift because I cannot give you GE stock during my life. I can't. So I said, you could give the $1 million gift. She puts up her hand, forget it. What do I say the next time? Margaret, you have always told me this house is going to the Allen County Historical Society. Margaret, you're 94, Clinton is 95. You could deed this property, call them up, invite them over, walk them through the house. It's going to be the funnest day of your life. You've traveled around the world. You might have other things you see on the walls you think they should have. You just go right ahead and you can deed your property to the Allen County Historical Society, subject to your and Clinton's right to live here for the rest of your life. Did I mention she's 94 and he's 95? I said, your deduction is going to be the fair market value of the house. She did it. Just like our colleagues here, it was another charity, but that gave her the gift. And she said it was the best day of her life to walk through that house because it was one of those areas of Fort Wayne that had the boulevard in between with the trees and the fountains, one of those beautiful areas. You go one block over and it looks pretty scary. You know, after Margaret died, Clinton lived there for a year. We were afraid he would just get robbed on a regular basis because one street over, it looked pretty scary. So who knows what happened to that house? I should drive up there and see. But that's where it went. Even if they unloaded it and sold it, what an awesome gift for the Allen County Historical Society. So that's, she had said it and I listened and I followed up on it and you can too. So it's only for a vacation home, personal residence or farm. The only ones, yes, it can be out of state. Yes, it can have debt on it because, you know, when you sell it at the end, you satisfy the debt. You know, you're thinking, do I have to drive over there and look at it all the time? In a way, there's some truth to that. I will say there's a catch to this. You should, if it's in your town, you should drive by because if that owner gets dementia like my dad, he may not notice that the roof needs attention. He may not notice that the gutters are completely full. And you always want to ask him every year, do you have insurance on the property? You know, you want to make sure those questions are met on an annual basis. And if you're really lucky because you're the remainder interest, maybe the insurance agent will just send you that notice directly so you don't have to bother them. But there is a little bit of risk on that. But, you know, so you lose the house. You had nothing to begin with anyway, you know. It's not like it's going to blow over and cause a liability incident. It's not like that's going to happen. So anyway, that's a wonderful, and a farm. Remember the park story, personal residence, historical society. And if you live next door to a property you dream of acquiring, if you drive around our town, you will see house after house after house with IU signs on it because they've outgrown all space and they park departments out, and they've bought some of those, but some have been deeded with this retained life estate because campus has been their whole life watching those students walk up and down the street and be wild and crazy in many, many exciting ways. All right, so now we can go to the next one. So there are numbers that can be run about that and so on. All right, the prospect responds to your question about savings bonds. That yes, I do have those, because I asked them. I sometimes say, you know, were you one of those war babies that really bought savings bonds in great measure? Because before banks couldn't sell them, that is the gift I always got for every high school graduate, because they weren't likely to go out and spend it immediately. So it was my favorite gift to give students. That's why people do still have those. When I talked about this in a community in Indiana, a woman came up afterwards and said, I inherited a box full of them from my mom. They're in a bureau drawer. I'd forgotten all about them. I am so glad you gave me these ideas, because Sarah, let's look at the next slide and see what they could do. All right, you have options with savings bonds. You can cash some of them in right now. Recognize some income. Yes, it's an income taxable event because it's ordinary income. That's why it's a different kind of income. It's like salary. It's like dividends. It's like that. It's ordinary income. So yeah, you'd recognize some income, but then you could make a gift of the proceeds to our charity, and that deduction is going to wipe out that income inclusion, not to worry. Or use those proceeds to fund a charitable gift annuity for you and another if they're older. Only talk about that if they're older. Even bequeath them to our charity. Now, this is a great idea, because a lot of people, a very forgotten asset. Advisors, if you do not have it on your inventory of assets, you should add it, because it's a secret, hidden, forgotten asset, no question. I will say to you that decades ago, and now it is decades ago, I was out in California presenting. It was a really big room. There were like 300 people in the room. It was really big. And I'm talking about savings bonds. And a woman in the front row interrupted me. She said, Pam, I have worked for charity for 15 years as a fundraiser, and never once have I had anybody mention savings bonds to me. I think that must be just Midwest ownership. So I said to the crowd, how many of you own savings bonds? 2/3 of the hands went up. 2/3. She jumped, literally jumped. So it's an asset that we should ask about, because it's forgotten, hidden. And I've given you 3 different choices. Cash them in. Some people say, I wish I could, my impediment to giving, I wish I could afford to make a gift to you this year, but I just don't have the disposable income. This is a good, if you have savings bonds, that would be a great source. That is a super idea. If you have a savings bond, that might allow you to do it, or fund that gift annuity, because that's income to you and another for life. I love that. You can tell, I keep saying it, all advice is tipped to the donor. Even John and Mary, 20 years of income for their worthless kids. It's always tipped to the donor, because if you make the donor happy, if you're ethical, they may seek out your advice and tell others, because they really want it straight. They know you're needy. So is the charity all up and down the street. They know it. They know you're worthy. All that is true. But if they don't see a way that they can make a gift to you and still manage their own assets, their portfolio, their needs, forget it. They're not going to do it. They'll make a nominal gift, and that is also, these are transformational gifts for many people. That's why many of these gifts happen later in life, because we're really planning, gee, how long do we want to manage property and take care of assets? And can we simplify it, as Thoreau said, and convert it into income? And do remember that diversification idea. A planned gift can be, maybe should be, part of a diversified portfolio. I think that's an economic bent that most of us just never even consider, but I promise you our donors are considering it. I promise you they are. I mean, that Park Farm family that achieved 4 different goals in that same transaction, from the outright charitable gift to income from mom and dad to income that grows for 20 years and pays annually to the kids. And then sale. I have cash in my pocket too. I mean, all is possible with a planned gift, and you can mix it up. Another story like that, there was an attorney I met with up in Northern Indiana, who her husband was an investment advisor. And I said to her in our estate planning, what are you most proud of from your upbringing? She said, my parents had 11 children. And I am astonished that we never wanted for anything. We never had extra, but we always had shoes, food, warmth, and a place to sleep. 11 children. Now she's childless. She was the oldest, so no surprise there. She's exhausted. So she and her husband have 6 different rental properties in that city. And she's thinking, she's hired some new attorneys. She's thinking of turning over her practice. And she really goes through this estate planning process to learn for herself, but also her clients. And I said, well, with these rental properties, you can decide every time you sell one, do I want to put some of the percentage into a charitable remainder trust for your husband and you to offset the capital gain? You could sell the rest, you could mix and match, you could put it all in the trust if you get older and you want a bigger deduction and you like the management of the trust. So we talked about all sorts of accommodations. So I said to her, because an open-ended question, I said, are you worried about anybody else in your estate planning? Is there anybody else that keeps you up at night? She said, well, yes, as a matter of fact. She said, out of my 10 siblings, I have one sister who's disabled and she's fiercely proud. She works. She won't let us help her, but I worry about her when she can't work. And I said, you know what? When you sell one of these properties, you could on the front end deed 5% undivided fractional interest in that property to the community foundation for a deferred gift annuity for that sister for the year you think she's going to retire. And in a year or 2 or 3, when she retires and she starts giving income and she comes after you and complains, you can say, it's irrevocable. I did it for tax reasons. I can't change it. And she will forgive you. And I can't, there wasn't one session I met with her that she didn't thank me for that idea. These solve problems, just like Howdy said, he said, he was the one with the spendthrift child. He said, tell people you solve problems. You helped my family with a very sticky issue. I don't want a trustee to manage this that my son can go and cry to and whine for to erode principal. I want it set that it's statutory. He can't get more than the 5%, and he wouldn't drive down here to ask you guys for more income. So he said, you have solved all my problems with this child who's caused, because remember, he said, I'm worried he won't support his own 2 children. That was the nagging fear. His own son, whatever it was, but his own children, scary for grandpa. So brilliant. And remember, that's the one that actually talked about it. That is also a great idea to have family along. Okay, do we have another slide? Yes, the prospect talks about retirement plans, the IRA, and talks about concern over the RMD and their taxation. And now that new Secure Act, boy, we can't stretch out the IRAs beyond 10 years anymore. So I work, this is huge. And I will tell you, in my town, because it's a college town, and we also have business here, I assume everybody has a retirement plan. And this is my go-to with everybody because it's such an easy to-go gift. I even used this idea on our daughter at age 22 when she got her first job with a retirement plan. She is a plan gift owner at age 22. 1% of her retirement plan and life insurance is directed to the Marion County Humane Society, where she got the first of her 2 rescued pit bulls. See, we can even suggest this for our own kids. This is a cool thing. Let's keep the philanthropy alive. So people talk, and so if retirement plan, I float this all the time. I don't know anything about you, but I bet you have retirement plans, therefore. So let's go to the shared set, the idea on this, Sarah. All right, here's the IRA charitable rollover. If you have an IRA and are 70 and a half and older, you can direct your plan custodian to pay contributions directly from your IRA to our public charity. Those distributions count as RMD and won't be included in your taxable IRA income this year. I talk to people like this, like Matt. If they even look close to 70, I'm talking about it. Because advisors, you can do, if they don't have an IRA, you can do a qualified rollover from any other retirement plan into an IRA. This is huge because people give to their church every year. They give to the hospital every, there's a bank of charities they give to every year. Why shouldn't, if they're 70 and a half, shouldn't they come from an IRA and then reduce the taxable income you get reported to you on? No, you don't get a deduction, but not counting a dollar as income is far more value than a deduction that might be worth the 20% bracket. So not counting that dollar is worth far, far more. This has dropped people to a lower income tax bracket. So anybody who's a regular contributor who looks even close to 70, this should be marketed like mad because like Kathy said, Kathy's broker, you could gave her a checkbook that she writes checks from her IRA directly to charity. And at the end of the year, she goes and sits down with him and he says, no, Kathy, your Rotary dues are not a charitable gift. No, Kathy, your auditorium tickets are not a charitable gift. No, Kathy, the church rent you paid to rent the wedding, the church for your child's wedding is not a charitable gift. You know, they go through the checkbook together and decide what they can exclude from income and not. It's a fabulous situation. So it is growing, growing, growing. And you do know there's proposed legislation out that will let the IRA charitable rollover not only be outright gifts to public charity, but also be used to fund life income plans like charitable gift annuities, charitable remainder trust, and pooled income funds. It has got some legs because Congress says we can get taxes out in the income stream of those vehicles. So we are willing to consider it. So it has, so we will see a change to the IRA charitable rollover. I do believe, because we don't seem to have any detractors. What could happen though, it gets attached to a bad bill. That's the most likely. That happens way too much. But RMD, now also my husband and I could also look at our RMD, take it out, and fund a deferred charitable gift annuity down the road at the community foundation. We could convert that asset holding to a deferred gift annuity, which starts paying our charitable pledges. So we have that option as well. It's a great source of funding. Since it's going to be taxed heavily to your kids, it's the perfect source of where your funds come from. And for charitable givers, we always say, look to that first, because everything in your estate goes to your kids tax-free. Everything in your estate goes to your kids tax-free, except here's the three things. Retirement plans, because they're untaxed compensation, deferred compensation plans are on that list. And I want to say the third one is savings bonds. I have a senior moment on the third, but the deferred compensation, the retirement plans, absolutely. Now, what can we suggest to everybody? The next time you go to your board or development committee meeting, you should all stand up and in your report, don't just say, here's our tally, here's what we brought in, here's the type of gifts, whatever. You say, we just heard a program that's going to be that is recorded, so we can share it with all of you. It's 2 hours and 2 hours, get ready. We can share it with all of you, but it's how to change your paradigm about plan giving. It's not the wealthiest people in town. No one in my town is going to go make a gift ask to Gail Cook, the richest citizen in the state of Indiana. No one's going to do that. But you know, what we can do is talk to 9 people on our database that we don't know anything about their estates and their situation, but we will have far greater chance of a planned gift amongst that group than putting all of our eggs into the richest person in the, I once heard a fundraiser said, would you rather be 360th in line at Bill Gates' store or first in line at Helen Smith's retired teacher? Give me Helen every single time. And you should think of it that way, that we can talk about these ideas with many people as we've gone through these ideas. And Sarah, do we have any more slides? I should ask that because I'm working into my conclusion. Oh yes, they're a liquid. The majority of their portfolio assets is in retirement plans. Gee, that's going to create income if I withdraw back to the retirement plans. And Sarah, what's our response? What's the next one? One of the best ways to support various charities now is by designating a revocable percentage of what is left of that retirement plan after you and your spouses use to one or more charities. Easy to do online on the beneficiary designation form. All ages can do it using an assets the tax children to inherit. I know that's a lot in there, but that's all true. Encourage people. You could say that at your next committee meeting. All of you can do that. If we could go out in an endowment push and say our board is so enthused, 100% of them have made a planned gift, even if it's 1% on a beneficiary designation of a retirement plan, that counts. It counts. So you don't have to say what it is. And you could say the beneficiary designation was very popular because it's revocable. You could change your mind every day. You don't have to fund anything. You can include all the charities you love in that same matter. You can add and subtract. You can even say to that person, I'll tell you a quick story about this. I visited with a couple in Indiana, and I think his estate was $14 million. I think he was in product, whatever. So he had only $1 million in retirement plans, just $1 million. He had a wonderful wife who helped people transition out of life. And he had two very well-educated sons. He bought one a condo in New York, sent the other to London for a study abroad. I mean, they were very generous, involved family. So we're sitting down doing his estate planning. And I said, this 1 million in your retirement plan, will your wife, Wendy, need that? And he looked at the rest. He said, well, she's 12 million other, I doubt it, whatever. And I said, well, go home and ask Wendy that. If Wendy needs it, it's hers. It's hers, it's hers on the beneficiary designation. But if Wendy says, no, I really don't need it, because Wendy's goals were very different than his. If Wendy says she doesn't, what you could do is designate as the primary beneficiary. Don't include her at all. This is the asset to do it. You can change your mind every day, but designate this charity and all others in percentages. I said, and you could give it all to this charity because I said to him, you know what? When you pass away, you know, your children don't live here, whatever, it will be glorious for your children to come back every year and be recognized as major donors to this organization, because honestly, by that time, this community won't even remember who you are. And he looked at me and it made a huge impression. I said, she needs it, she gets it, because tax-wise it's fine, but if she doesn't, what a way to let the kids come back every year and celebrate you in a crowd. That would be a beautiful thing for them. So we're in the legacy business. We are in the perpetual business. We are in the ideas business. We are in the you can do business. And we should talk to everyone. There's nothing here that I bet you haven't heard. There is nothing. And people are saying, these are my impediments. And if you notice, every one of these really talked about assets and needs. I worry about more income. I worry about having to manage property. I worry about not having enough for my surviving spouse. I worry about taking care of my children and making sure they're protected. I worry about having too much work to do as I age. We can address all that. So in our last minute here, I'd say to you, thank you so much for letting me speak. You know, your goal is to have thank you, that's the perfect last slide. To have a gift conversation with many, to move it along. You have lots of allies and collaborators. It's not just you. You don't have to do it alone. You have a walking order list of concrete activities that will help produce results. Build it and they shall come. Make the world aware. Make it part of conversations. Give people good ideas and use the great resources you have right there in your community and elsewhere. We're all glad to help you. You can even call me free and say, what did you mean? Tell me this, or I have a donor who. Call me, email me, and I will help you with that situation, because a rising tide lifts all boats, and I am a colleague all day long. So Joey, Sarah, what a joy. I can't believe, my husband said to me after 2 hours, I can't believe you could do that for 2 hours. And he's probably in with a cloth over his head right now after listening. Thank you so much. It's been just a pleasure.
Pamela, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Pivoting back to our Plan Giving Council members, thank you for being a member. For those of you that are not members,